Welcome to the Social Network Society podcast titled Talking Ties, the Science of Social Networks. The podcast is part of the Social Network Society's efforts to foster meaningful connections among scholars engaged in research, teaching, and practice of social networks.
In this podcast series, we'll spotlight recently published peer-reviewed articles and uncover more about the fascinating world of social networks through the lens of authors. We'll also engage in discussions with faculty regarding their experiences teaching social networks to diverse audiences, as well as addressing related topics such as maintaining a healthy work-life balance, navigating the job market, and more topics that we hope would be useful to our listeners.
This podcast is brought to you by the Social Network Society Communications Team and is sponsored by the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Your hosts today are
Tia Timova Shakur, Assistant Professor at Texas Christian University,
and Jason Ross, Assistant Professor at Western Carolina University.
Summer is already here, which means it's time for job market preparation for those who will be on the academic job market this year. Schools are beginning to post job openings, and application deadlines are not far behind, often falling between early August and late September. So, in today's episode, we'll talk about how to prepare strategically and thoughtfully for the season ahead.
We've invited three stellar assistant professors who went through the job market somewhat recently. Francesca Nannetti at Neoma, Seong Won Yang at the University of Mississippi, aka Ole Miss for our Southern delegation, and Andrew Foley at NYU Stern.
Each of you brings a unique set of experiences and valuable perspectives, and we're so excited to have all three of you here with us today. So without further ado, let's begin by having each of you tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us your story. How did you decide to become an academic? Anyone can start.
Okay. Ladies first, Francesca.
Okay, I can start. So how I decided to be an academic? It was not in the plans from the beginning. So I worked in the industry for almost 3 years after my business school graduation. Then there were some questions in the field that I wanted to understand, and I kept talking with a friend that was actually doing a PhD at the time. So I decided to look into PhD programs to see what it was about, and I like the idea to go in deep into understanding some dynamics in organizations, and that's a little bit how I started. A little bit randomly because it was through conversations with a friend. So yeah, then I started the PhD program and I was convinced it was the right path. Yeah.
Honestly, I don't have a very interesting story. I know that some people had a life-changing turning point that changed their entire career path at some point, but I didn't experience such a thing. I really decided my career path early on as an undergraduate student because I just really enjoyed learning new things in my undergraduate coursework, and psychology courses were particularly interesting to me. So I just naturally set my career to go to a graduate school and become an academic. And if I have to name one thing, I remember that I once participated in an undergraduate research program where I had a chance to be involved in a real research project run by a faculty member. And, I was an undergraduate research assistant, so my job was really, really simple, right? Organizing data in an Excel spreadsheet and calculating some really easy descriptive statistics. But I still found that work really, really intriguing and interesting. So that also helped me to decide my career path.
Yeah, so I was more, I think it was more in sort of like the Francesca camp. I was not like expecting to become an academic. It was actually sort of my third career. So my first career is I was actually a professional musician. I have 2 degrees in music performance, and I worked as a flute player in the Louisiana Philharmonic for a while. So I was an orchestral musician, and growing up, that's what I thought I would do for my whole life. But when I was in grad school, actually at Hopkins, and even continuing to when I started my career in classical music, I got very envious of what my friends in like engineering and entrepreneurship were doing. They were like starting companies and like doing consulting projects for the government that like solved some real world problem that they saw, and I was like, wow, that's very cool. So I wanted to do something like that. And then that sort of took me into my second career, where I entered a fellowship for this program called Venture for America. If you guys have ever heard of it. It was a nonprofit that was started by Andrew Yang, the former presidential candidate, and the basic idea was trying to get like recent graduates to go work in startups in sort of fallen US cities, and think about using entrepreneurship to revitalize some of these places. So I spent a couple of years in New Orleans working with incubators and accelerators and startups and my colleagues thinking about, how can we use entrepreneurship to return the city's economic vitality to what it was pre-Hurricane Katrina. And so I was doing that work for a couple of years, and then that kind of naturally led me to thinking about, okay, so why are some places more suited to entrepreneurship? What do they produce? Sort of a more sustainable stream of growing firms than others, and what do entrepreneurs need to be successful? And so I thought maybe I would try a PhD. That was my third career. And to be fair, I didn't even know you could do a PhD in business. Like I was thinking of like economics because I was like, okay, that's business, I guess. And then kind of ended up learning that I could do a PhD in management. So I did an MBA first and really explored the PhD during business school. And then I realized academia is this very cool, unusual career where you get to stay obsessed with something for a very long time. And I found that suits my personality pretty well. So I think this is my third and last career.
Andrew, do you still play music?
I do. Yeah, it comes up in weird ways. I gig around town as much as I can. At one of my job talks, actually, since this is a job talk podcast at Darden, Ed Freeman learned that I played flute like a week before my job talk. And he sent me an email. So I hope he sees this at some point. And he sent me an email and was like, "Hey, Andrew, your job talk's Monday morning. I have band rehearsal Sunday evening and I hear you're a musician. Do you want to join us?" And so like I flew down to Darden and I was like jamming with Ed Freeman and his band until like midnight or 1 a.m. And the next day I gave a talk at 8:30. So
That's great.
How did you all get into conducting social networks research?
So if I may start again, because yeah, for that it was not really, it's not an interesting story, but at the beginning of my PhD, I wanted to work on creativity, and then during the PhD program, there was a social networks class, and I started understanding that what I wanted to understand was how creativity would develop through social networks. Actually, that was not something I had in mind before. I knew it was something about relationships and people talking to each other, but I had no idea social network analysis existed and that it could be something to be studied in deep as a theory and as methods as well. So yeah, it was with a PhD course in the program. Yeah.
Yeah, in my case, also it just happened naturally to me. So I did my master's degree studies at Yonsei University in South Korea, and my master's degree advisor, Professor Hong Seok Oh, is a social network researcher. So he did his PhD at Penn State with Joe LaBianca, Jay Mera, and yeah, under his guidance, I was just so naturally exposed to social network research and I got interest in that area too. So, as I mentioned briefly earlier, my original interest was in psychology. So, my interest in psychology and my newer interest in social network analysis, they got combined to shape my research interests, which is basically micro foundations of social networks now.
yeah, so my experience was like, I mean, like almost the opposite. Like for a while, I didn't even have someone to learn networks from. So I think like my interest in social networks actually started when I was working in New Orleans. So in career number two, I guess. And so while I was down there working on like the entrepreneurial ecosystem in New Orleans, my colleagues and I developed this like theory that ended up leading me into social networks. And so we called this idea the rock candy hypothesis. Like for anyone who doesn't know, like people who watch this or anything else, like rock candy is like something you get at carnivals or like on a boardwalk. It's like, a crunchy, colorful candy on a stick. And, it importantly only has two ingredients, sugar and water, and then food coloring, so maybe three ingredients. But the important idea here is that if you add those ingredients to a bowl, you're not actually going to get rock candy. So if you have a bowl of water and you add a ton of sugar to it, like, these rock crystals are never going to form. You have to add a piece of thread to the mixture. And then after you introduce the thread, the rock candy starts to build on this thread in sort of like a recursive and continuous way. And you get this like structure, this beautiful structure of tasty crystals that you can then sell or eat. And so we started thinking about the entrepreneurship ecosystem in New Orleans through the lens of this analogy, right? So the puzzle was that, on paper, the city had all the right, ingredients. It had tons of sugar, right? We had great entrepreneurs, top-notch universities, tons. Like I think we had more incubators and accelerators per capita than like anywhere else in the Gulf South for a while. Really like growing investor community, but we still hadn't had a major exit in the city, and firms would often like leave to relocate after getting like a Series A to New York City or somewhere else. So, we had this city with tons of sugar, but no candy. And so as we like were, as we were spending more time developing the community, what became clear is that the city sort of lacked strings, these connections between these different people and groups so they could actually make use of each other. So like entrepreneurs were often not aware that they could even apply to accelerators. VCs didn't know where to find them. Incubators and accelerators like were unsure of how to get connected with the universities. And sometimes these threads were like toxic, right? So incubators would undercut each other to compete for the best entrepreneurship cohorts. VCs would like push startups into like really bad deals or unprofitable business models. And so our sort of goal after the first summer was like, how can we take this very well-resourced bowl of great components and get some interesting structure to build? How can we like create these strings amongst these different constituent groups? And so I think my research still sort of builds on those questions. That's what I started thinking about in the PhD, right? What kinds of social structures help entrepreneurs build firms? Which kind of community structures or endowments of social capital like enable versus constrain entrepreneurship? And actually, I think like my whole research portfolio is those two questions.
So transitioning into the job market, what was your search like? Did you target specific schools, a specific geography? And if you feel comfortable, how many applications did you send out?
Yes, I don't remember the exact number, but I think I have applied to around 30 places. And my search was pretty much targeted. So I mainly applied to public schools in the United States. I did apply to a few private schools and schools in other countries, but public schools in the US were my main target. And the reason for that was I did not want to go through a big transition to a completely new environment. So I did my PhD studies at the University of Kentucky, a public school in the US, and that's where I started my research. That's where I taught a full course as a main instructor. And so I thought getting a job in a similar environment would help me to make the transition to the next phase of my career. And especially it would be my first job. And I think that was the right decision for me.
Yeah, I was my search was pretty targeted. And so like I think I also maybe also applied somewhere between 30 and 40 schools. But before the market, like my husband and I, we sort of sat down and were like, these are the places we want to live. So there was three geographic areas in the US that we applied to. And I basically just tried to search for places in those three locations. And that so we were geographically sort of very constrained, but we also what was helpful is that we thought pretty carefully about what would matter to us in terms of a location, in terms of the kind of department I would be in. And so before I even started the market, I had like sort of developed this like ranking of all the places that I was applying to and where I wanted to go. And that like really helped me psychologically in two ways on the market. The first was it helped me to like stay grounded when new jobs were posted, because I could very clearly be like, okay, that's not in my, you know what I mean? That's not in my, it doesn't have the attributes that me and my family need to be happy, so we're not going to apply. Or if it does, if I do apply, if it fits in those criteria, where does it sit on my list? It also helped when I was kind of juggling offers, because if one school came in that was clearly better for us in terms of our life than another one, I could let it go very quickly. So there are no painful decisions, I think. So yeah, for us, kind of filtering based on these few criteria up front, though it limited my search considerably, and there are a lot of great schools I didn't apply to, it did make the decision process on the market much easier.
Yeah, I think I had a similar approach, but in Europe only. So it was similar in two ways. So one, it was like negotiations at home on where we would live. So there were also some places in Europe where, because of the language or because of the difference from France, we would say I don't see ourselves being there, or maybe if the job market doesn't work out, so maybe for a postdoc, so for a short amount of time, and then we would go back somewhere else. But that was also something I would have liked the idea of a postdoc to focus a lot on research only, but I didn't want again to move after only 2 or 3 years. And the other similarity was that I had a list of criteria that I weighted on how much is, for example, for me, how much location is important, the people in the department, the type of research, the salary, and those type of things. And then I would be able to, I think it's useful because you can either be a little bit more objective when you rank the options, and also if you see that according to your criteria the school that pops up doesn't make you happy, it's also a sign that maybe the other one is the right one, right? So yeah, I also sent out, I don't remember, but between maybe 20 25 applications, between 20 and 30, I don't remember, only in Europe, and yeah, targeted places in Europe, mostly France. Yeah.
Let's transition to some of the more written materials that's in everyone's job market packet. So I was wondering, how did you all approach like writing your research statements, your teaching statements, right? Did you like seek out from other individuals, maybe within your department? Just how did you all go about doing stuff like that?
I can start with this one. So oh, sorry, we have a visitor. Sort of busy right now.
Bring the baby back. That's part of the show with the dogs included. Every time we had Radon and her sit in the background the whole time for us. We loved it.
He would be value add in terms of content, I promise. And he's got great ideas, that one, mostly revolving around like chicken. But sorry. But what I was gonna say is, so I like two thoughts about this. In my case, what I think I was very fortunate about was that we had a couple of seniors who had graduated like 2 or 3 years before me in the program. So Kunyan Chao and Sabrina Shen. Kunyan's now at Northeastern, Sabrina's at, I think it's HKU or HKUST in Hong Kong, and Kathy Liu at Minnesota. They sort of shared their materials with me. And that I basically said, well, okay, the three of them did very well. So if I just pick one of these, this is going to be the right format. And I think that helped. So I think in my case, and if anyone can, leaning on sort of these norms of collaboration across generations in your PhD programs is probably a good way to get started. I thought the hardest one to write was the research statement, and it took me a while. So I ended up treating it less like a summary of papers and more as kind of like this narrative about problems that I care about. And I think one of the best pieces of advice that I got about the market, and especially the packet, was from one of my advisors who said, you know what, here's how you have to think about this. Departments don't hire papers, they hire an agenda. And so you need to make sure that your current and future agenda are very clear and coherent and compelling to like an audience who's expert in your field, which I think was it changed the way I thought about the statement, even if it sounds a little obvious. And so logistically, it took a lot of time because it took me a couple of weeks, I think, to write a good statement because I was trying to like articulate the deeper thread in my projects. But what I think really had helped me a lot, which is maybe the reason why I didn't spend even longer, was that during the PhD, I spent a lot of time at like conferences, consortia, workshops, PDW, where you have to kind of articulate your portfolio, either in writing or to other people. Like, I'm pretty sure I went to one or two that Francesca organized at AOM or EGOS or something. And those experiences really like repeatedly forced me to articulate my burgeoning research agenda as like a second, third year PhD student, which gradually like clarified the questions I was working on and even like influenced which projects I took on after. So I had sort of a more coherent pipeline than if I never went. So if there's something that comes from that, I think what might be interesting for listeners and other PhD students is like those are great experiences to do early on because they kind of prep you for the job market a few years in advance. They ask you to like confront the hard questions and, they sort of let you turn your research agenda into an identity in some sense. You find the thread in your work and you kind of proactively maybe start picking up projects that align with it as opposed to just kind of being all over the place, which is what I was doing in the first couple of years.
So I completely agree that the research statement was the hardest one to write. I had other people's materials that they shared with me. I think one was Tia's research statement that she shared with me. And yes, I think it's a hard exercise because it's like it also asks you to reflect about your identity as a scholar, which it's really useful if we start doing that in advance because even as Andrew was saying at events and when we pitch a little bit about ourselves, I think for networks researchers in particular is a little bit hard because what my experience was on the market is that people try to put you into categories, for example, micro, macro researchers, and we are a little bit in between. So we have this meso level, but then in OB departments, people are a little bit confused. In strategy departments, people are also a little bit confused. So it needs to be really convincing on what is our identity and what you can bring to. Because, yeah, for example, in my case, in some schools, I would fit more with so some schools have a management department, so it's a little bit easier, but other schools have OB and strategy departments. And in some instances, I would fit more with the OB scholars that were at the school, in other instances with more the strategy, OT strategy people. So, yeah, I think it needs to be really clear in the research statement. And I started early, but maybe still too late because it took me really a while. And then my supervisor would revise the materials, so she helped me a lot as well, Elisa Alberti. So yeah.
Yeah, again, I completely agree that research statement was the material that took the most time to prepare. And yeah, just like Andrew and Francesca said, when I wrote it, I did my best to communicate my coherent research pipeline and my coherent identity as a researcher. And yeah, I actually have seen many PhD students who are worried about establishing a coherent research pipeline, a research identity. And to be honest with you, I was one of them. So I understand their concern. They're like, how do I choose my research area? How do I have multiple research projects that are related to one another? Should I give up research opportunities that seem to be unrelated to my field? Well, I understand those concerns. And my advice is really don't worry too much about it because I believe if you do your job properly as a PhD student, I think you will be able to build your research identity naturally. So I did not choose to participate or initiate research projects very strategically. I just chose those research projects if they looked interesting to me, even if they might seem unrelated to each other back then. But in my year 5, and I was writing my research statements, just looking back at my research projects retrospectively and thinking about what interested me most in those research projects, I could just naturally identify that, well, even though I didn't plan it ahead of time, but I now realize that I had always been interested in understanding people's motivations to alter their network ties. So sorry, I went off on a tangent a little bit, but that's what I focused on when I wrote my research statement, is communicating my research pipeline and my research identity. And to talk a little about the teaching statement, I think what I did with that was to show the actual examples that I did in my course. So, for example, one thing that I highlighted in my teaching statement was something along the line of I really encourage my students learning through some activities and instead of just full lecturing. And that's what I actually did in my negotiations course. I run negotiation exercise every single week. And what I also do is I reverse the order of the class. Like I have them do the exercise first and just wing it on their own, and then debrief the exercise what they should have done to get better negotiation outcomes. And that really helps my students learning. That's what I actually do in my course. So I just described those actual examples of mine to kind of support my teaching philosophies.
Thank you all. So that was two of the big statements. And now one others that every job packet has to have is the cover letter. So I was wondering how you all went about doing your cover letters. How much customization did you do? And like what areas did you actually customize if you did for any schools?
So I customized a lot. Like I think each cover letter probably took me 3 or 4 hours to write. And that was just my approach though. But I think what you end up doing again depends on your searching strategy. Again, in my case, I had a sort of limited search, right? There were sort of 3 geographical regions of the US that I was applying to, and I was really only applying to schools that I was very, very serious about. So for each of these places, I invested quite a bit of time, like trying to articulate why they mattered to me, why I would go, how I could contribute to the department, just who was there that I would, be interested in working with, getting mentorship from. So for me, I think because I had sort of like a very focused approach, it was maybe more important because I had sort of less of a catchment that I really try to communicate my fit with these places. And also just it was possible, right? I wasn't applying to like 100 schools. So I think if I were, I don't think I could have spent this much time, but everyone has a different approach and that was mine. And that's what worked for me. In terms of what I spent the time on, because you asked which parts of the cover letter I spent more time customizing. I think so. I spent a lot of time. It was almost like I was applying to like PhDs again. I was like going through, reviewing kind of what the faculty been working on. And the question I kept asking myself was, have I like actually cited any of this work? And because I think that to me seemed like the more authentic way of connecting with people. Like there were, you end up finding out, this is like it's going to be such a commentary on our field, that behind every sort of like name and date on a paper, there like is a human. And when you're on the job market, you see a lot of them. Like, Thea's at TCU and the name Bruton was in a lot of my research papers. And so as I'm going through, I'm like, oh wow. Yeah, I've read and cited this one of Gary's papers and this one and this one and this one. And so through that exercise of like going through and being like, all right, who has written the work that I've been writing for the past 5 years, you start to realize that you have a lot of very natural intellectual overlaps. I tried to find and highlight those where I could, but that add a lot of time to the process.
Yeah, I think for me, I also customized the letters, and I think it's similar. So it took me some time to study the department and what people in the department were doing, to actually mention names in the letter of people that I would have liked to collaborate with and why, and how I thought my research would fit with the research of other people in the department. So same, I think it was feasible because I didn't apply to 100 schools, so that helped. But I also think that, yeah, really studying what people are doing and who are these people, so that also when you go to the job talk, you are able to refer to what you wrote in the cover letter. And if people ask you about things, you didn't forget because it was just writing names from the page of the faculty in the department. And yes, I customized all the letters, and I had a similar actually approach, that I only applied to school where I would have accepted an offer from. So I didn't send application to schools where I knew I would not want to go, even if it was like the only option. So yeah, I think it's important to customize the letter. People are also happy when you meet them if you mention like in details their work and why you think it's interesting for you. Yeah.
Well, in my case, I did not customize my cover letter very much. Of course, I did a lot of research on the people at the schools that I applied to assess my fit with them and with the department, but I did not include specific names in my cover letter, so my letter was rather generic. So in my case, of course, I had to customize a little bit depending on the application requirements. Some schools required a really, really long cover letter, which was basically pretty much same as my research statement. Some other schools just want them to be separate completely, and they require only a one-page cover letter. So, but other other than that, I did not do much customization with my cover letter.
So I guess one thing, since you all are on the other end of this now, could you maybe, what's one piece of advice that you would maybe love to share that you wish you knew going into this?
And before we do that, Jason,
Oh.
didn't you have a story you wanted to
Oh,
share?
okay. So yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and share this then. Yeah. So we've talked about customization, and a lot of you all gave examples of good customization. Since I've been on the other end and reading these now, I've experienced some pretty bad customization stuff. Like, for example, for mine, we got a ton of people sending in letters like, hey, I would love to live in this bustling city right here. It sounds absolutely amazing. And then here was the issue. And then whenever you actually think about the city they're describing, it's 2,000 people. I mean, it's a small, small town. And I was like, how did they come up with this? Then I looked on like the town website and they started using like the term bustling for that. So it's basically just people using like AI to try to figure this out. So good customization. Listen to our panelists. Bad customization. Stay away from massively. So.
And one more thought that I had. So we talked about the research statement and the teaching statement, the cover letter, but some schools now are requiring a diversity statement. Did you have to write one?
Yes, for some schools, yes. My approach, once again, was to use the actual examples. I focused my diversity statement around teaching how to make a more inclusive learning environment in my classroom. And in diversity statements, first, diversity can mean many different things, right? So it can be gender diversity, it can be racial diversity, and in my case, it was the cultural diversity. And especially, I was born and raised in South Korea and taught my first classes in the US. So, and I also had quite a few international students at the University of Kentucky, and I experienced something with those cultural diversity in the classroom, and I actually did something to help those international students, which was basically like help them to participate in the course more actively. Like instead of just cold calling their names to make them speak out, that can be very, very, very intimidating. it is not like they are not paying attention to my class. They are paying attention to my class. They have a lot of thoughts, but they are just a little bit afraid of speaking out in public because of their language barrier. So I use this technique called the soft calling or warm calling. So I, at the beginning of the class, I just give them a blank sheet of paper and just jot down any ideas and thoughts during the class. And then during the mid-class 5-minute break, I collect their idea sheets. And then if I find something interesting in their sheets, during the break, I approach them individually and say like, I found your idea really, really interesting. Would you mind sharing with the entire class? So that gives those international students and just shy students in general to be prepared to share their ideas in public. And that really helped me to encourage everyone's participation in class. So that's one thing that I did in my classroom, and I think that really helped international students particularly. So I use that example in my diversity statement, and that's how much I emphasize the inclusive class environment, and this is what I would actually do in my class in the future too. Something along that line, yeah.
That's actually a great idea. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure about what I'm going to say, but I don't think I wrote a diversity statement per se. I included in the teaching statement parts about inclusion of students in the class and some examples of things that I implemented in my classes, but I don't think I was ever required to have like a document as a diversity statement, but I'm not 100% sure. That could be that I forgot, but I don't think, maybe in Europe it's less common than in the US. Yeah.
I think it's becoming more prevalent to attach one with your application, but I don't think it's mandatory in most places, even in the US.
Okay.
Thank you all for sharing. Jason, do you
Oh,
want to
okay,
repeat
we'll
your
pivot
question?
back. So yes, so we'll jump back into that one. So I guess since you've completed all of this now, is there one real big piece of advice you would want to share with individuals that are going on the market? What's something you wish you had known?
Something that I wish had been communicated to me more directly was kind of how communal the whole job market process is on both the supply and demand sides, and how important it is to kind of respect that. So what I mean is that I think usually when you are getting ready for the job market, it's very you focused. It's like yourself and your paper, and it's like the capstone to your PhD, and you know what I mean? You're going to go fight for a job, right? It's like this gladiatorial analogy. But what I have since learned after being on the market and also being on one hiring cycle as a faculty now is that like this really is a community effort with lots of stakeholders. Like your friends are going to be on the market with you. You want to be respectful of the hiring committees you're talking to. And, you know, everyone is involved, and most people probably know where you're at in the process, whether you know that or not. And you just want to, you know, you want to be as respectful and other focused as you can manage, I think. Like you don't want to hold on offers for too long because that's bad for the hiring committees. It's also bad for like your friends who may be the next person on the list or something, right? And I think this matters a lot because if you think about it, for a lot of people, like the job market is really the academic community's first experience of collaborating with you in a sense. Like you're like going through an interview process with them, you're negotiating with them. And so I think it's important if you, again, to the greatest extent that you can, because it's very stressful, to be thinking like, how can I be a good colleague throughout all of this? How can I be cooperative and maybe give a little here and there to these other stakeholders in the process? So nothing that I learned beforehand, but quickly on the market, I kind of picked up on that and tried to keep that in mind wherever I could.
I think on my side, maybe it's not one big piece of advice, but few pieces of advice. So one, which is related to what Andrew is saying, is that to also consider like so it's super stressful and very tiring to be on the job market, but also it's like a time where everyone is interested in your research, and maybe it's the time where people are the most interested in hearing about your research and what you're doing and giving you feedback. And so there's also actually a positive side of it that people can try to enjoy also a little bit the process, even if it's tiring and stressful. It's really, I think it never happens afterwards that people are so into hearing about what you're doing and yourself. Another piece of advice is really, so the part of preparation we've been talking about, the research statement, the teaching statement, which is a lot of work, but then flyouts and talks are also very tiring and stressful. So don't arrive there too tired and stressed. Try to pace yourself, and link to that. Use the Excel spreadsheet parsimoniously because it can be really double-edged sword. It's useful to see what schools are opening positions, but there are some tabs that are let's say not useful actually. Don't yeah it's tempting to go and check all the time what is happening, but I think it's not very healthy. Yeah.
The infamous Google Doc sheet strikes again.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that can be very toxic. So yeah, I completely agree with Andrew's and Francesca's advice, and yeah, looking for the positive in the negative. That was very helpful for me to manage my stress, and in my case, just appreciating that communal side of the job market that Andrew just mentioned. That was the positive that I could find during my job market experience. And another piece of advice that I would like to give job candidates is that keep in mind that job search is a very stochastic process. Yes, doing good research, publishing papers, delivering awesome job talks, yes, they do all matter for sure. But there still are many other factors that affect hiring decisions. So even if you get rejection, it does not make you a lesser researcher or person. It could have been simply because your research area does not align with the school's current hiring. That's it. So don't take rejections personally. Don't be too depressed. And it also means that you should be humble if you get a job. So yes, you are hired because you worked really hard and you did a great job with everything. It's because you are a great person. That's for sure. And yeah, you should be super excited and happy about your major achievement. But at the same time, don't forget all the people who have supported you in your job search, throughout your PhD studies, and just your life in general.
And maybe if I can add something we didn't mention, but I thought it was very challenging, and I don't know if other people have a solution to that, because I don't, other than knowing in advance that schools have different schedules. So like maybe you have to make decisions about school and you still haven't heard back from a school that you would prefer. So you kind of have this trade-off of accepting something. And so in my specific case, for example, I had an offer, but I was more interested in Neoma actually. So I called them and told them I have this other offer. So if you can let me know quickly so I could extend the other offer, but only for 1 week. At the end, it worked out, but it's very stressful also to make the different deadlines match somehow. So also maybe having this rank or criteria in advance helps also understanding what to do in these situations where you have to make the decision quickly and it's not an easy one. So yeah, maybe I'm just throwing in a problem on the table instead of giving an advice, but there's something else that I found stressful in the process. Yeah.
No, I don't think you're just throwing out a problem at all, Francesca. I think that's like one of the most stressful parts of the market, actually, especially when you're trying to be a good community member and you're trying to respect everyone's needs. I don't know, I don't have like a solution for this per se, but I took an approach similar to the one that you just mentioned with your Neoma offer, where I just I just stayed under the assumption that there was zero information asymmetry in the market and that everyone knew where I was going and what, you know what I mean, what my choice sets were, because I think that's kind of true. And I just tried to be very communicative, as you were in your case. And if there was a school that I like was very interested in, I would kind of let them know, and I would say like, you're my, top or whatever, and I've got this other offer that's going to explode. And what I and vice versa, right? Maybe another place would be like, hey, I'm waiting for this one. Can you give me one more week or something like that? And what I tended to find was that people appreciated the just straightforwardness. I think if you can give them the information they need to help them plan and move things around on their end, they seem to be willing to budge as far as they could for us. I don't know if you experienced the same thing, but I don't know, maybe that's the solution. Is just be communicative and and be very clear and be genuine, I guess. But my approach was similar to yours, Francesca, but I think it's a huge problem and is very stressful.
Thanks for bringing it up. Now that we've applied, we've submitted our materials, it's time to prepare the job talk. How did you go about preparing your job talk? When did you start putting your slides together? And how many times did you have the opportunity to practice before doing your first job talk?
It took me some time first to decide which paper I would present at job talks, if it was like the more advanced one or the one that would convey my identity the best. So I went for the latter option. I don't think it worked well in all places where I went, because some people then asked me like on one-on-one meetings, like, why didn't you present this other paper that is more advanced? And then I had to explain why. Then I started preparing. I don't remember when I started preparing the slides, but I think before I knew about job talks dates. And I think I even started rehearsing before I did. So what I did was that I created groups of people in my department at ESSEC so that I could do several trials with different people, so that I didn't have to ask people to come 4 times to hear the same talk again and again. So I had like 3 to 4 people every time in the department that came, and I asked them specific, really to be not mean, but like to challenge me on the paper. So actually it worked out, because then the real talks were not easier, but people were nicer than the people to whom I asked not to be nice. Before that, I also did online mock job talk with some friends. So maybe I should have started with that, because at the beginning I wanted friends to give me feedback, but also I wanted to feel safe and having people that would be nice to me at the very beginning, so that I wouldn't question everything. And then I think I did maybe 2 mock job talks with friends, and then 3 at my department or something like that. Yeah.
In terms of the timing, not just for the job talk, but preparing your application packet in general. So the job market begins in late June or early July-ish. So ideally, you should have all the materials ready in early June. And what's more important than having your application packet ready is, I believe, is to propose your dissertation in the spring semester before you go on the job market, and ideally to have some preliminary results for your dissertation studies, if possible. Because from the hiring school's perspective, if a job candidate hasn't passed the dissertation proposal, they cannot be 100% sure that if the person would graduate on time to join their departments. So I think so passing the dissertation proposal is very important. And that really helped my job talk a lot as well because I presented my dissertation studies in my job talk, so I could build on my proposal slides to build my job talk slides. So I could not tell the exact amount of time that I spent on building my slides because of that. It was a rather a natural process for me. And in terms of practice job talks, actually, what I should have done was to take Francesca's approach. I did not do many practice job talks with different people, which I really regret. I think I a mo did mock job talks only twice with the entire department. They were already super helpful, but I think it would have been even better if I did it more times with different groups of people.
Yeah, sorry, I just add something that I forgot to mention before, and sorry, Andrew. But I mean, in Europe also it's a little bit different. We defend the proposal a lot. Like it's really early stage proposal, so I think it's a little bit different in terms of time. It's like I think it's at the beginning of the third year where we defend the proposal, and it's really on ideas. And at AOM, which is where I felt the market really started for me, there are preliminary interviews, and some people asked me about the job market paper. So of course not a presentation, but what it was about, and I kind of a pitch. So just as an advice to have it ready for AOM, where people might ask.
So yeah, first of all, to Francesca's point, I think that's important. Like you're gonna kind of need the paper before AOM, I think. Thankfully though, like Singh said, I think my slides were kind of an extension of my dissertation work. So yeah, it was hard for me to say like when did I start working on them because it was somewhere between like proposal and job market. I also practiced quite a bit because what I realized when I started practicing was just like so hard it it was quite difficult to actually get an audience to consistently understand my work the way that I wanted it to be understood. Like sometimes it was like, oh, my paper is like a Rorschach test. Everyone just sees whatever they want to see in it. And so there's this experience of like, you think you've done the all the work and it should be self-evident, but it's really not. And I think it's a real act of communication to be able to present the paper in such a way and to handle Q&As in such a way that, your message is really getting across. And that ended up being much more difficult than I expected. So I also, like Francesca, practiced quite a bit. Just a final thing on choosing the paper. I was also choosing between like three. I ended up choosing the one that not everyone loved the most, but that I think was closest to what my research agenda was, this idea of like networks and reciprocity. So that's the one I picked, even though I had there's like an RCT that some people were like, you should do that. That's like empirically unimpeachable and, it makes total sense. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know how much of those I'm going to do on the tenure clock. Is it like inauthentic for me to present that? I think I'm going to do all this networks and entrepreneurship stuff. So might as well show them who I am. And that was my approach. I went with the one that seemed to be closest to what I wanted to do.
And an advice I've been given that was actually helpful, and sorry for jumping in again, but it was that when I did the mock job talks, I would write down the question I've been asked and prepare answers because they tend to, like the same kind of questions tend to come up, and then you have your answer ready is for when it comes at the real job talks. So I actually had flashcards with the questions and the answers I would want to give. Yeah.
Great. Thank you all for sharing. And since we all love to study social networks, we thought we will ask you a practical question about how social networks helped you, if at all, during the search process. Did your social network play an important part for you? And particularly, was your advisor very hands-on, reaching out to their network on your behalf? Anything that you feel comfortable sharing would be great.
Yeah, my answer is absolutely, absolutely. So I had known Christine Colin Lester at the University of Mississippi. Before I hit the job market, we were acquaintances, and I also met her at my job market academy, and she sent me and my advisor a quick note after the academy, like the University of Mississippi is hiring this year, please apply, and which was a job posting that I missed for some reason. Maybe I think they just posted their job right before the academies, and I somehow missed that. And yeah,
Mm.
thanks to that reminder, I applied to Ole Miss, and that's how I got here. So really, another win for the strength of weak ties theory. And yeah, my advisor, Joe LaBianca, he helped me a lot throughout the entire process, which I'm still very grateful for. So what helped me a lot was to really borrowing his social capital, right? So what he did for me was like before the academy, Joe and I sat down together and made our AOM schedule together so that Joe could introduce me to his contacts at the academy. So we sat down and looked at the academy program, and Joe was like, "Oh, this person will be presenting in this session. Let's go there together. I will introduce you to this person. Oh, this school that you apply to, they are having a party on Friday night. Let's go there together." So, yeah, I believe that helped me a lot, and I also am pretty sure that he has done a lot more for me behind the scene, like calling his contacts and spreading the word. Yeah, that really helped me a lot. That played such an important role. So, yeah, I really can't thank him enough for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think everything Songwon, a lot of what Songwon said resonated with me, so I don't want to rehash it, but I think all of that sort of things my advisors were helping me with also. I'll just add something kind of complementary, which is, we often think of network ties as sort of like, these pipes that can connect us to like other people or resources, which was kind of what Song was talking about. For me, there was a sort of a network component that happened like years earlier, which was that I think being part, like figuring out which communities in the academy I wanted to join, like the social networks community, was very helpful because then as I got to enter those communities, I got to have conversations with people about sort of what were the questions that were kind of worth asking, how could I study them, and were those questions of interest to me as a researcher as I was building my portfolio? And so that happened in a lot of like interesting ways. Like I remember I was working on a Tertius Jungens paper, a brokerage paper, and then I was at the ASQ reception and Alessandro Iorio from Bocconi was like, Andrew, stay here for a minute. And he like went away and came back and like he was standing with David Obsfeld. And then like David was like, tell me about your paper. And I told him what I thought was interesting about it. And he basically said, here is like where the state of the art of the field is. And here's where it's moved since I wrote my paper in 2005. And so that conversation saved me like, you know, 3 months of literature reviews because this was back in the day before ChatGPT, so you actually had to like read all the papers. And anyway, I just wanted to say that in addition to, but there's a sort of a process that if you're very reflective and thoughtful about trying to figure out where in the academy your intellectual community is, then I think there's a way for you to kind of speak with them and learn from them and get feedback from them years leading up to the market to help you kind of focus in on a set of questions and even to figure out like if the set of questions in that field resonates with you as you're sort of choosing your own paths forward. And so to me, there was this identity component of learning who I was through conversations with these other people, which kind of helped me double down into figuring out where my sub communities were. And so that when I got to the market, it was very easy for me to say, hi, my name is Andrew Foley. I study how social networks constrain entrepreneurial opportunity identification. Done, you know? So anyway, I'll leave it at that. I just wanted to compliment Seong's answer with that one.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I am going maybe to complement both. I agree with what has been said. I think so. My advisor helped a lot for several reasons. She couldn't come to AOM, so what helped me a lot was that I built social relationships or my social network before in advance, because I think depending on your personality also exchanges and interactions when you're on the market at AOM are a little bit awkward because people know why you're going and talking to them. So for me, it helped a lot the fact that those people that I wanted to talk to because I was applying to their schools, I actually knew them from before when it wasn't so instrumental. So I think it was very helpful for me to already know the people from different school that I was interested in before the year of the job market. So also it helped even more because my supervisor could not be there to make the introduction. So I actually had to show up myself and be like, hey, so some people know because you apply in advance for preliminary interviews, so that's a more like formal type of conversation. But at events or yeah, things like that, I found it was a little bit, yeah, a little bit uncomfortable just to go and pitch yourself out of the blue because you're on the job market. So it was easier because I knew them from before. Yeah.
What a perfect way to wrap this up. The last question being from the Social Network Society, of course, is about social networks. So thank you all so much for sharing your experience with us and our audience. You all provided so many useful tips for people that's going to be on the market soon. And we really appreciate your all's time, effort, preparation for doing this. Thank you all again for helping us out.
Thank you for inviting. Yes.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. Thank you, Thea. Thank you, Jason. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
If you like today's episode, please like and subscribe to our podcast. We're looking forward to getting your feedback. If you have any suggestions, feel free to email us at communications.sns@gmail.com. We look forward to touching base with you.
Thank you all for listening.